Well, Chris Ross and Ed Marx are two of the great leaders in healthcare and CIOs for many, many years. I knew Ed. Gosh, Ed, you were actually one of the very first people that came and saw me. We
I
got a chance
remember.
to meet in Chicago. I think it was my first or second day on the job, and my head was spinning around. Chris, of course, has also been chair and is chair of the HIMSS board of directors. He's been there actually for a couple of years, which is absolutely terrific. He helped us in the transition of our governance model, where we now have one board of directors looking all around the globe for continuity. I have found the two of you truly to be at the heart of innovation. And I know the two of you have been working on a book together as well, and you're here to talk about it. So let me just say that for everyone, and there are over 70, almost there's 75 people on this right now, which by the way, congratulations, fantastic. So I get a chance to introduce you to Ed Marx and Chris Ross, truly, and I mean this sincerely, two of the very best minds that we've ever had the fortune to have inside the health ecosystem in figuring out not only where we are, but more importantly, where we're going. So with that, let me hand it over to these two gentlemen.
Right, right. Ed and Chris, you can go off to the races now. Thank you.
Let me see if I can make some adjustments here in our Zoom so we can spotlight gentlemen a little bit better.
Ed, if you want to present.
Yes, I will. Yeah, that's my first test, right? Hal bestowed upon us such high praise. Now, can Ed actually present in Zoom? Can he, bring up his slides without embarrassing himself? Because his systems are different. So yeah, I will do that. But thanks, Hal. That was a terrific introduction. I've been truly blessed to be part of HIMSS. I think that's been one of the things that has helped me the most in my career. I remember being this really new to healthcare. It was in Pueblo, Colorado, actually. I was serving at Parkview Episcopal Medical Center. I was brand new into healthcare technology. And I didn't know much, but I had a great CIO who was part of HIMSS, and he took me with him, Mike Gogola. He put me in his convertible one day, and we drove up to Denver, and I saw Ed Kopetsky, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is awesome! This community." So I joined a HIMSS chapter, helping with some education things in Colorado, and then just took advantage of all the capabilities of HIMSS and the local chapters. And it's like, wow, that just propelled me to learn, and I met so many people and got so educated and continuously throughout my career. So I owe so much of any good thing in my career to HIMSS. But anyways, I'll let Chris sort of introduce himself and what we're about to do, and that'll buy me a second here to bring up.
Happy to shuck and jive for you, Ed. Let me second my thanks for my really dear friend, Hal Wolf. It's been great to collaborate on HIMSS. And same thing, when I came into healthcare, it was late in my career. And I was a CIO at this crazy thing called Minute Clinic, which was basic healthcare in a drugstore sort of model. And I didn't know anything about anything. And I came to a local HIMSS chapter and learned a lot. And it was because of HIMSS that I was less of an idiot than I normally am. So I think Ed's maybe having a little bit of trouble getting the slides to work this morning here. So I think we're getting a block, and I apologize for being a few minutes late. I was getting an invalid Zoom ID when I was trying to log in this morning somewhat frantically.
Alex,
so Ed, should we keep trying with the slides, or should we go slideless?
Well, maybe Alex, I don't know if Alex, is there a way you can present? I know
I get an error message just saying host disabled, participant screen sharing. So someone would have to clear that blocker, but we can start in terms of thanks again for having us. Just give me a little signal once the screen thing works, and I'll bring it up. Thanks for having us. As Hal mentioned, one of the impetuses for us being here today is we are working on this book. It's a book we wish we didn't think about, but we're glad that we have the opportunity now to put this book together. And we wanted to share with you why this book is being put together and share with you some of the experiences that led to the book being conceived and some of the early things that we're learning through the research, where it's not a research book or an academic book by any means, but in order to be sure that we could represent all populations and all types of provider and payer systems, we did a lot of focus groups and we did research. And so we have some early findings from the book. The book will be published sometime next year, probably mid-year. It's being published by Mayo Clinic Press, so we're really excited about that. 100% of the profits will be donated to curing, eradicating cancer. So there's a fund being set up within Mayo Clinic specifically towards cancer that all the proceeds will go to. So even the publisher is donating their profits. So that's pretty unusual. Sometimes you'll see writers donate all their profits, but what's a little bit unusual is the publisher as well. And it'll be distributed by Simon & Schuster. And the interesting twist to the book is we're not writing this book for healthcare, but the presentation we did put in some things for healthcare specifically. So it was interesting as we went along this journey that the publisher approached us and said, this book is maybe too important to just be written for a healthcare audience. And then as we thought more about it, it kind of made sense that there's been a lot written already about patient experience, and there's been a lot of programs in healthcare around patient experience. The term patient experience is a little bit new, but the concept of it has been around for some time. And we've only moved the needle so far, and it's not a negative thing, but we've only moved the needle, so far, and not far enough. And so by writing this book for the general public, we can kind of attack the problem of experience from the other end as well. And hopefully the two meet someplace and really empower patients and people, because I don't think they realize how much control they do have for experience. And so that's sort of the genesis of the book. So Cris, anything to add to that before we'll jump in slide list if we need to? I'm just checking. Oh, I can share my desktop now, but Cris, yeah, anything else to add?
Well, thanks, Ed. The only thing that I would add is that we began writing this because both of us had significant healthcare journeys. Mine was to go through cancer twice, and Ed's was a cancer journey and a heart attack that was significant. So this is a pretty personal book for us, talking about our experiences and not in just sort of an abstract kind of way. As Ed said, this is not the book we really wanted to write, but we, both felt that by sharing our experiences, maybe we can help somebody else.
Yeah. So what's going to be a little interesting too for this presentation is that we definitely want feedback. So I don't know how we enable that, maybe through chat or whatever, but you can ask questions throughout. And there's actually a slide where we're going to stop and ask you some questions because we're interested. We're still in information collecting phase. While we did a lot of focus groups, we're still learning more. And so if you have anything to, we're going to ask you some questions and you can respond. I don't want to challenge our hosts by on audio or video. I don't know if that's capable, if we're able to do that, but definitely from chat. So let's dive right in, and we'll go kind of quick here through some of the slides so we can get to more of the interaction. So can Cris, someone give me a thumbs up? Can you see my slides? I'm thinking you can.
They're up.
All right.
Yep, we sure can.
Yep.
All right. So here's sort of like, we're diving right in. We already did. We're talking a little bit about our journey, the purpose we talked about. We're going to have dialogue, interaction with you, some of the drivers around patient experiencing and turning it upside down, the findings. And then we're going to share with you and test a model that we have that we're going to share with patients to help them navigate a better patient experience. So, well, I know what's unique with my friends in Ohio and Central and Southern Ohio, him specifically, is I've spoken with you all before. It was like 2 years ago. And it was because I had this heart attack, and talked about that experience. And so I was thinking probably like you were thinking, man, that was Ed's hard moment in life, and good thing he's over that. Little did I know a year later, like after speaking with you, and actually when I was there, I actually had cancer. I just didn't know it. But I had prostate cancer. And so that was my journey. I always had this elevated PSA. We all hear about it, especially as men, but for those who aren't men in the audience, who I'm sure you have men in your life, whether it's father, brother, partner, whatever, sons, please encourage them along getting early prevention. So I did. I was smart enough. I always got annual physicals, and sure enough, my PSA started elevating. But at the same time, I was becoming this athlete. And so the doctors said, the reason that your PSA is going up is because, you're spending so much time in the bike. And that's true. Typically, cyclists have a higher level of PSA just because, think of the anatomy and sitting on that saddle for so many hours. They have elevated PSA, but mine kept going up and up, and I sort of ignored it. And my doctor, he was like so laziest fair about it. And I didn't take control. I should have taken more control, and I didn't. That's one of the lessons. And so anyways, finally things came to a head, just kind of fast forwarding in the story. And sure enough, I'll never forget the day. It was June 10th of 2019. And I showed up in my office. So I knew that I had an issue. We had developed our great, using AI, our great clinicians, some of our techs had developed this new PSA test that uses AI and has a 95% accuracy level, as most tests only have about 50% accuracy level. So I did do this after I realized, yeah, you do have a really high PSA and probably have cancer. I did this, the lab portion of that, where they take tissue sample, and not a fun experience. And so that next morning, so I did that afternoon. So the next morning, 6:30 in the morning, I'm walking my office, June 10th, and there is the chairman of our urology and kidney institute. And I knew that wasn't a good sign, and we both walked into my office without saying a word, because we both knew what was about to happen, the dreaded, you have cancer. And it was like, oh my gosh. And it was a traumatic experience, as you would expect. And it was bad cancer because I'd waited so many years, so it wasn't like early detection at all. Anyways, I had great treatment. So you can see, that's my wife, that's my nurse. So I got to sleep with my nurse. So my wife is the nurse, just to be clear on that. And that's my doctor, Dr. Klein. He's head of, number one in the world type person. He's great. And so I did a radical prostatectomy. So that was because of how far my cancer was. That was really about the only rational choice. So within the good news on my cancer journey is within 45 days, I went from, okay, you do have cancer, to surgery and recovery and being cancer-free. And I'll never forget that day I got that call, and you're done. So yeah, you can see some of the pictures there. Yeah, in fact, the picture on the right where we're standing, I think I have a Cleveland shirt on actually. We're standing and my wife's hugging me. That was like about 5 minutes after Dr. Klein called me, and I got the test results on my digital front door. So anyways, that's my journey. And the lessons learned, I already covered some of them. I'll just pick on one and then turn it to Cris. The being transparent, because some of them might be a little bit obvious. I'll just pick on one, being transparent. So, it's kind of, a lot of people feel shame, like with prostate cancer, not like they can control it or anything, but because, it's so private and intimate, they feel a lot of shame. But I just took the opposite approach. I was like, you know what, there's a lot of people that have prostate cancer. And I think we need to do more about it for early prevention. I don't want anyone to have the experience I had. And so it's best to be transparent. So I blogged weekly about exactly what was happening, all the treatments, all the side effects. Some of them were kind of funny, but it helped a lot of people. I had 12 that I know about, right? I don't know about all the stories, but these were people that actually took time to approach me because I published on LinkedIn. And so it was very public. I had 12 people who approached me and told me that as a result of the transparency, they went and got the test, they had cancer, and they got it treated. And then many others who contacted me saying that they got, they're more diligent now about their PSA test. So that was great. It's like, I'm glad to be transparent. And that's why, we're writing the book too. So with that, Cris.
Thanks, Ed. So my story is somewhat similar. I began to develop some symptoms. I had had appropriate scans and so on, but I began to develop some symptoms. Asked for a colonoscopy, sort of ahead of schedule, and discovered that I had a stage 3 colorectal cancer. That was in July of 2018. And I went through the routine of chemotherapy, radiation therapy, and then surgery in the spring of 2019. And I got through that and returned to work at Mayo in May of 19. And, it was a difficult treatment. Chemotherapy is not fun. Radiation therapy is, for me, relatively mild. The surgery was really a challenge. They had to do an open surgery because of the complexity of the cancer, and they, a big incision from, my breastbone to my pubic bone. I've got a great big scar in my stomach. But the recovery was pretty straightforward. Got a lot of help through it. Ed, maybe you can go to the next slide. What I really tried to do the whole time that I was being treated was to live fully, and to live life with some gratitude. These are pictures that were taken actually, while I was having treatment. In the upper right one, I was in the middle of radiation therapy, and at the bottom left one, I was getting ready for surgery. The other thing that I learned from a dear friend of mine whose daughter had leukemia twice was to find the gift of cancer. What is this going to teach me? It's an odd thing to say, look for the gift of cancer. And when my friend said it, I thought it was magical, but a little bit nuts. But I found that for me, it was an important guide to find the gift of cancer and what it was going to teach me. And for me, going through cancer the first time was, I was going to be better at my job. We had just gone live with a new EHR in our Rochester campus in May of 18, and I was started my treatment in July of 18. So I got to encounter an awful lot of clinicians who were just wrestling with this new EHR. It was sort of like the chef eating his own cooking. Unfortunately, what I learned 700 days to the day after being told I was cancer-free was that I was diagnosed that my cancer had recurred. Some wild cells had escaped that location, and it turned out I had a cancer growing on the outside of my colon, adjacent to where it was before. And that diagnosis happened in February of this year. I went through the same thing, different regime of chemotherapy, a different type of radiation therapy. And then I had a jumbo surgery on July 15th. It was a 15-hour surgery and had 6 different surgical teams because, I had to do it fancy with the tumor in a really bad place. So I came out of that surgery cancer-free. What I'm working on right now is the surgery. The tumor's in the wrong place, and some nerves that control my leg were stressed during that surgery. So I lost use of my left leg. I'm currently wearing a leg brace, and I get around with crutches, or if I have to go a long distance, I'm in a wheelchair. But the good news is the nerves seem to have regenerated, and my muscles seem to be recovering. So I'm doing tons of exercises to get back to form, and I hope to be walking without aid by next summer. So that's my story of going through cancer twice. I learned different things the second time than I did the first, and I do think I am better at my job. I do think I'm more empathetic, and I do think I have a calling to try and share my experience with other patients.
Yeah, so that's combining our stories with what we talked about in the very beginning. That's what kind of led us down this idea of a book. Is like, wow, that really opened our eyes. We all know theoretically patient experience, right? Of course we do, and we've been patients to some level, but like this was extreme for both of us, and it really opened our eyes to some new things. And we thought, wow, if we are dealing with experience and we kind of have an insider's knowledge, how hard is it really for those who don't work in the industry, who are truly, novice coming in. It's overwhelming. It's disjointed. It's dysfunctional, generally speaking, right? There's all these pockets of, great things happening at some of our institutions, but in general, it's very, very difficult for a patient. So it changed the way that we operated at our organizations. And so we thought, why not share how it changed us and what it changed for us in our organizations and how we rethink things. And so that's really the bulk of what we're going to share with you next. As I mentioned at the top, is sort of some of our early findings and ideas. So here's where sorry, this is a twist for AJ and the board, but we just had a couple questions. I don't know if we can do it via chat, or if we can do it via video, or if people can raise their hands, that sort of thing. So sorry to throw a curveball at you. We'll go either way. And if we can't do any of them, we'll just move on. But we're really interested. If anyone has any things they want to share briefly on how their hospital or organization approaches patient experience. So PX is patient experience. Why is it important? What are any of the tools that you use? What are some areas that still might need to be addressed? And if you were CEO, how would you address patient experience? So little curveball there, see if get a response from anyone.
Yeah, Ed, this is Alex. I'm helping moderate on the Zoom. So if anybody does have comments, want to add anything, why don't we start with it in the chat, and then we'll try to highlight that. I'm not exactly sure how to allow some of our attendees to go on camera. So
Okay.
I can let folks ask questions, though, if I could see a hand raise on Zoom.
Yeah, and what we can do, just put it in the chat if you have. So as we go along, if you have some things, okay, a survey. All right, cool. So if you want to answer any of those questions as we go along, it doesn't have to be right now, but I do see Andrews. Thank you. How do you approach patient experience? How important is it? Is it like one of the stated goals and objectives of the organization? Like you might have financial goals or clinical quality goals. It's always really interesting. Yeah. So someone else, Alan. Hey, Alan. A patient experience committee, multidisciplinary. That's cool. Okay, that's good. If you have other things, please feel free to share those. So what we also wanted to do in this book is really talk about best practices from other industries. So it seems that other industries might be a little bit more advanced than healthcare when it comes to certain things. And I think the experience is one of those. So we thought, what can we learn from others? What has worked? What are some of the highlights from industry? So we just selected a few examples. There's many, but they're really good at telling stories. So storytelling is really critical and in reaching out to consumers. They're not necessarily going to understand, hey, what's the latest in MRI technology, right? But they might understand a story. So with Gerber, there's a sense of authenticity. So when they had a hiccup, when they made some errors, missteps in Gerber, they were very authentic about it, and people actually became more loyal to the brand than disloyal because of the authenticity. Others are using language really well to their target market. So they're very careful about this sort of language that they utilize and in dealing with different, again, populations, because sometimes in healthcare, we use very high technical clinical language or language that may be maybe too sophisticated. Like for me, sometimes it's like, wow, what are they trying to say? Just keep it really simple. And so that's something. Gamification is something, Starbucks is really good at in terms of reaching their consumers or making it really easy, right? They also are very highly personalized. So they know exactly what my order typically is. If I turn on the functionality, it'll tell me, hey, Ed, you're near a Starbucks. Do you want to order your usual? It pops up on my phone. I could just press a button it's making things really simple and user friendly. And the last thing is personalization. So you learn this from Purina or Mont Blanc or Oreo. So all of these are just samples that what we can learn from others. But in terms of personalization, you could go, for Oreo fans out there, you could go to Oreo and actually create your own Oreo cookie. You know how they have so many different flavors now? Those came from people who went to their site and created those. And you can do the same. You could even create Oreo cookies with your kid's face on it, as an example, if they love Oreos. So it's highly personalized. Purina is the same way. So even with dogs, right? We do more to personalize things for dogs than we might our patients. So if you visit a Purina site or interact with Purina on their app, you can actually create your own dog food mix. So those are just simple examples, but really profound on how to better create this experience for others. So learning from other industries was a key thing. These are the next couple slides we'll just go through them quickly. And you'll have access to these slides as well. So we'll leave these behind, but these are pretty obvious ones, but they're easy to read through for yourself. So again, we won't read through them, but I don't think any of this will be a surprise to any of you, but these are done through research and studies through some vendors of HIMSS like TalkDesk, but there's also some of these were done through McKinsey, and you'll see those here in a second. But obviously, the messaging here is that the more personalized, the more experiential, the tighter the bond is with patients. So again, I'll let you sort of see these and read through these. I won't, again, read slides to you, but again, they're all sort of saying the same thing, but in different ways and in different studies, where it's really about the more real you are, the more authentic, the more personalized, the more loyal you're able to connect with your patients or your populations that you're serving. These were best practices cited by McKinsey. There's the 4, and again, I won't read these to you specifically, but again, just what we're trying to do here is show you whether it's best practices, whether it's from other industries, whether it's different studies that are done, or some thought leadership by McKinsey. This is what consumers are looking for when it comes to the experience. And you can see here the topics of affordability, continuity. They are looking for digital and omni-channel capabilities, which we're going to talk about as well. So before we move on, I'm going to pause here, see if Cris, if you had any comments just on the last few slides, kind of as an overview, because what we're going to go into next is to share with you sort of a model based on some of this research and our experience and focus groups, share with you a model that we've developed that will be a tool for patients.
Thanks, Ed. So I would probably say 2 things. One is, why is it that healthcare is lagging other industries in terms of patient experience? And I think there's probably a couple things that can explain it, and would be curious, what if this resonates in your institutions. I think one piece of it is that we have become so focused on improving specific processes within our institutions. So we may have a safety consideration that mandates that we do things a certain way. It might come from a regulation or an accreditation body. And it's really important to have those processes in place, right? They protect patients from a safety perspective, for example, or they make the hospital efficient in some way so that we can, patients can move through the institution effectively. But one of the consequences about being really excellent at all these discrete processes is we've not put enough energy into trying to create experiences and services in the way that the patient wants to experience it. So I was lucky. I had a really great patient experience going through Mayo, but part of that was because everything was together. If you're getting your care from multiple locations, it gets to be really a problem. So think about it, where a physician says, you know, you need to get some labs done. You know, here's some labs that are nearby. Go make your appointment, go get your labs and have them send the results to me. You know, that's a discontinuity that drives patients crazy, right? That they have to have this disjointed experience. It also can happen within an organization. I ran into an experience where there was a rule that chemotherapy sessions couldn't be scheduled until the physician, the oncologist, signed off on the lab results that you received. So I knew I was going to have 8 rounds of chemotherapy each time. It would have been a really good thing if I could have scheduled them all in advance, but I ran into this process brick wall. That no, I couldn't schedule my appointments beyond the next 2 because the physician hadn't had a chance to review my results. Well, criminy, let me schedule my exams in advance, and if it turns out I need to not have that exam, that chemotherapy for some reason, reschedule it. There's certainly going to be enough demand for someone else to take my slot. So I found where processes run into each other. The second thing I would say is that there's 2 patient experience sort of levels. One of which is, what does the institution want to provide for you, and what's our intentions as organizations to create a great patient experience? And the second is, what's the experience that you create for yourself? Every experience is different, and regardless of what the institution wants to do, whether it's good or bad at driving patient experience, having your own notion of what your experience is going to be is really important. And we're about to take that notion and blow it up a little bit further. Should I do this one, Ed?
Yeah, go for it.
So this is a little bit of the model that we're suggesting to a patient who, gosh, now you've been diagnosed, your head is spinning. What should I do as I'm confronting a serious health condition? And our viewpoint is that everything begins with the patient themselves, yourself, and what attitude are you intending to take towards healthcare? And for most people, it's just overwhelmed. Tell me what I need to do, and I'm in the system, and away I go. I think the thing that we would advocate for is for patients to be conscious about what do you want as your criteria, and what's important to you as you go through this journey, even though it's overwhelming. What's your intentions for care? So for me, having a colorectal cancer, I was afraid of 2 things. I was afraid that the cancer was going to kill me, and I was afraid that I was going to end up after the surgery with an ostomy, a permanent, bag to carry my bodily wastes, and that would be this awful thing that would come with me through the rest of my life. And so I communicated that to my clinician. My view was I wanted the most lethal therapies I could possibly get to kill this cancer, and I wanted to avoid having a permanent ostomy. And my physician listened to me. All my physicians listened to me, and I was fortunate enough to make it through both courses of colon cancer without those results. I had exceptional, lethal therapies, and I'm hoping and believing that the second time through was the charm, and I didn't end up with my body being compromised in a way I didn't want. So that's from a patient point of view, understanding it's overwhelming, but what we want to try to do is to write to patients around, what can you do in the first week or 2 weeks post-diagnosis to kind of get a handle on how you want to go through your course of treatment. And of course, it's going to change as you learn more. The second circle outside that is, how do you activate your village? And for most of us, that's family first, but it also involves friends, and sometimes from people who you don't even know are going to be your advocate. They come out of the woodwork and they really want to help you. And it's a remarkable experience to go through a significant health experience and find out who your village is going to be that's going to support you and give you feedback and provide dialogue with you and experience. Then outside that is the team that takes care of you, primarily your clinical team. And what is your treatment regime going to be like? How are they going to be present for you as you go through care, whether it's a long-term chronic illness or something that's episodic, or one episode in acute. What we want to do a little bit with is to say, those three circles are the people you can talk to, that you can touch, that you can influence directly, you can have an experience of personally. But there's a little bit of discontinuity between those first three circles and the next two. The next one out of that is the system in which you're receiving care. And that's usually, for most people, hospital or a clinic that has rules, processes, methods, best practices, restrictions, all kinds of things that you might not know how to navigate. And you might not even know, why is my doctor forcing me to do this weird thing? Or why am I getting woken up 3 times in the middle of the night to have labs and vitals taken? Why can't I just sleep through the darn night without my labs and vitals taken? Well, it's because the system has rules that your vitals and labs have to be taken through the night. And so we're going to interrupt your sleep. That's something that you as a patient can't touch directly. Maybe you can write a letter or, raise a point through a patient advocacy group, but the system has rules that you might not understand that affect your care. And then outside that is this even broader community of insurers and medical device manufacturers and pharmaceutical manufacturers, government regulations, accreditation bodies, all those things that have influence on the systems in which you work. And we as healthcare professionals know how influential that community is on systems, and therefore the policies and processes that they put in place, and how those policies and processes, where they come from a good place, can sometimes really interfere with a patient experience and make it hard. So I think what we want to do is kind of draw back the curtain a little bit. You could explain this model from the outside in just as well and say, here's the policies that influence healthcare, and this is what makes health systems operate in a certain way, and this is what makes your doctor have to do things that sometimes drive you crazy as a patient. And yes, we're writing this book to patients, but we hope that others might pick it up from a patient experience and have that aha moment that maybe some well-intentioned things could be adapted or modified so that it doesn't have sometimes such a negative impact on patient experience. So maybe this is a really obvious model, that's fine. But sometimes what we want to do is for the overwhelmed patient or a friend of a patient who happens to pick up this book, might be able to take some very simple lessons and use them over, in a straightforward way to make their journey a better one. Ed, what did I forget, or
No,
how should we improve it?
That's a great overview. And I would just say that at the end of each of these chapters, we're making it very practical. Hey, here's 2 or 3 things you can do now to prepare, to understand. So not only do we talk about it from a theoretical point of view in our experience, but also try to be very practical with them. Like, hey, here's some steps that you can take today. So yeah, the hope is that it really removes this mystery and provides some level of understanding and really empowers the patient and their families. So this is our final slide, but this is sort of the takeaways that maybe we'll take a little bit of time on some of these key points, sort of summarizing these early findings and key takeaways. And we tried to make these primarily from the point of view for people like us who work in the industry. So I'll take, we could just take random ones. Cris, I'll take one, and then I'll turn it back to you, and let's just pop back and forth. One is that experience is best caught, not taught. So you can read books, you can have good sessions, that your chief patient experience officer teaches, and all those are fine. We're not negative on that at all. We think it's important, but it's really a cultural phenomena. And the one example I'll give you in our research is there's an organization, 147 beds. They don't have a chief experience officer or director or anyone of that title. They don't have a specific program around experience, but they are all about the patient experience. And so how it started is when the CEO, it happens to be a male, he goes around and visits every patient. So when you're a new patient in their hospital, you're getting a visit from the CEO. Now think about that. If you're a report to the CEO or a report of a report to a CEO, and how it trickles down in terms of culture is you see how important that patient experience is, that the CEO, he's taking time out of his day every day to visit patients. And it's not like a quick, hey, stick your head in the door, but he goes into the room and has dialogue with the patient and gets the feedback directly from the patient. That sets the tone, the culture for the entire organization. So it's best caught, not taught. In a practical thing is, even if you work in the industry, do not think necessarily that you understand it super well, because that's what I thought too, until I had these experiences. Like, oh my gosh, it's much different. So another thing that you can do is allow people to tell stories to your teams. Have guests that tell stories, your patient guests and those sort of things. Tell stories to your team. And then, the other things you can do is volunteer. I volunteered within the hospital myself. I worked in a hospital, but I also volunteered for years and years and years in a hospital because I needed that perspective. So that's one takeaway. So I'll turn it to Cris, and then we'll just kind of bounce back and forth a few times.
Yeah, and on that first box on the left too, I would want to just elevate the message at the top too, Ed, around learn cross-industry best practices. It was really popular maybe 5-10 years ago. I think there was a book that came out that said, "What if Disney ran your hospital?" And it was, a good book that described how they created patient, experiences for their guests in all of their venues. And maybe that should apply to hospitals. And it's a great lesson. But the main point though is it can't be something that's just on the surface. It can't just be a crust or a facade. It has to be something that's learned deeply in. So Ed's example of the CEO walking around is not just a crust. It's not just a superficial thing. He's visiting all those patients. But you also know, we learned that CEO was driving the idea of patient experience deep into the organization and how they thought about delivering care. I think we can learn from other industries in all kinds of ways, and we should adapt them and apply them as best practice. So a little coda on that first one. On the second one, around including patients and partners in design and meeting patients in their own channel of choice. That's something that we feel pretty strongly about. And part of what we want to do is to encourage patients to understand what their channels are and understand what their choices are, and to be clear about them. Now, when I talk to our clinicians, they don't complain. They're very clear. We don't have an absence of activated patients. There's lots of patients who come to our hospitals and clinics who are vocal about what they want and why they want it. Mayo is in a position like Cleveland Clinic, where Ed was, and like many institutions you're involved with. We are a referral location that deals with some of the hardest cases of all, and patients who've gone through a lot, and they've learned over time that they need to advocate for themselves by the time they get to our door. But even a place like Mayo, and I'll let Ed speak for Cleveland, is not where we need to be in terms of our intentionality and our ability to really hear a patient, and as part of the routine part of care, to be able to take in what the patient wants and to help them be clear about what their choices and what their options are. But this looks like, this seems like something that ought to be part of every health system's design.
Yeah. And, to that point, you can have, it might be sort of a profound statement, I don't know, but you can have a good or bad experience in the same hospital. So again, that's why we're writing the book for the consumer. So you can go to a great hospital and have same processes and those sort of things, and two people have a different outcome in terms of their experience. So that's something to be keen on. We a lot of times put all the pressure on ourselves as organizations, like to ensure a great experience, but a lot of it does rest with the patient themselves and their ecosystem, their village, and their broader team. So you have to look at it from both angles. You can't just think of it just from your organizational angle, but every person, every patient is unique and has unique circumstances. And then, right below it is one that we already brought out in the example of the CEO, but don't feel what we found. So it really speaks to what I just spoke about. What we found in our research is that the organizations that had great experience scores or experiences didn't necessarily have to have a chief patient experience officer or some sort of office like that. It's great if you have it, and it's great if there's a budget and title. So we're not saying anything negative about it. We're just saying, even if you don't have that, does not preclude that you can't have a great experience for the majority of your patients. So it takes a little bit of pressure off of on the provider side, that it's really, and it goes back to the fact that it's really more of a cultural phenomena. So I think we'll have time, Cris, if you want to pick one more, and then we'll leave time for questions and answers.
Okay. So I just do the next box about engaging your illness and clinical team with equal intensity. Different patients have different approaches to their care. Some people are real fighters and want to be highly activated. Others want to take an approach of, I'm in the hand of experts. I'm going to trust them. I'm going to do what they say. I'm going to quietly accept, whatever is recommended for me. And we did a little bit of research into this in cancer care anyway. There was a hypothesis maybe 40 years ago that said maybe the attitude that a patient takes would predict whether they were going to have a good outcome from a cancer journey. Or frankly, maybe that attitude would affect whether they even get cancer in the first place or not. There's a lot of belief about that, or questions about that. And what subsequent research over the last couple of decades has found is that it doesn't really matter so much what attitude you take. If someone really wants to be the person who wears the beat cancer t-shirt and take a feisty attitude, as opposed to someone who is simply more passive and compliant, that doesn't really have an effect on your clinical outcome. But what does is this idea of resiliency. And so when we say resiliency trumps attitude, it means that you can take whatever approach you want through a difficult illness. But the one thing that we would advocate for all patients is to find that well of resiliency within you, because you're going to need it. And if resiliency comes to you because of how your village can support you, or resiliency comes to you because your care team gives you faith and confidence, or if it's just something that's within you, all the research suggests that patients who have a greater degree of resiliency and ability to take the hard blow and keep going are more likely to have a good outcome. And that may sound somewhat obvious, but it wasn't obvious to me when I began my 2 journeys through cancer. But it's a lesson I've learned hard, and one that really makes sense.
Yeah, those are really key. And I agree, Cris, some people will hear that and say, oh yeah, well, of course. Well, when you're in it, when you're diagnosed with cancer, or it doesn't have to be, the book's not really about cancer, but whatever it might be, like you're sitting there on the table in the back of the ambulance staring up at the ceiling like I was one time. You're not thinking about these things. And that's why it's so important to think about them ahead of time. And I just love the engage your illness and clinical team with equal intensity, because so many people, and there's reports done. In fact, we were reading some research done, I think it actually was by Mayo Clinic, about, the white coat syndrome type thing, and like likening it to hostage situations where you as a patient, and again, for those of us in this audience, we're more immune to this than the average, right? Because we work with white coats all the time. And some of us may actually be white coats. But for the average person, they don't, and they will agree, and they have this respect, right? Which is good. We're proponents of respect, but to the point that they won't challenge and fight for themselves. And so I love the whole concept of that equal intensity is really key. So some of these things actually are profound to patients and their families. Wow, I can ask for something different. I can, say I want to go a different direction. Yes, you can. So it's meant to be very, very empowering for individuals. We're going to stop here in a second and take questions in our last 10 minutes. But someone in the chat put in something about health equity, and it just reminded me. Cris and I are huge proponents about health equity. And so we do address that in the book as well. It comes up in the model in a couple of different places. There's the whole social equity, the health equity. We will have one chapter specifically to communities that are probably left out more than others today, and that is the transgender community. I was going through all my acronyms, it took me a second, the transgender community. So that if you don't live in New York or LA, it's very difficult and a lot of challenges today. So that community in particular at this point in time is having a lot of difficulties getting the sort of healthcare and the experience that they need. So we actually had a focus group with the transgender community, and it would break your heart hearing some of the stories, just because there's so much. It's pretty new. It's out in the open now, and not a lot of healthcare organizations know how to give the same type of experience. So, anyways, we're very cognizant of the health experience, and that's what we're trying to do by the book too. We're trying to even the playing field. We heard in focus groups from patients of color, patients who have been marginalized, and how more difficult it is for them to have this experience. So the book is meant to sort of equalize the playing field for everyone. All right. Yeah, someone says, where are we in the writing process? They're ready to read. We appreciate that. It's as those who've written books before would know, or written a paper in college, it is very challenging, and especially one that's pretty deep. So the book, so we're working hard on it, and we've got great support helping us. We're thinking mid next year. We were hoping in times for HIMSS 2022, and maybe we'll have some early copies out then. I don't know, but for mass production, it'll probably be after HIMSS sometimes. But we're working hard, in addition to our regular jobs and those sort of things. All right, so I'm looking in the Q&A. Oh, that was the Q&A. Okay, so if you have other questions, please jump in there.
So there's a couple comments in the chat, Ed, that we might raise up. One is this notion of consumer experience versus patient experience, and why did we pick one over the other? You want to take a shot at that?
Yeah, so I think we're headed toward, and man, Cris, maybe it's changed, but we're headed towards more of the consumer or person experience, not patient experience. So the reason is the book is written for the mass public, and they're not your patient yet, hopefully, and so we want to reach out to people before they're patients. And so we're really more attuned to the consumer. And some people, I understand the negativity around consumer. So now we're playing with person experience, but it probably won't be patient experience, I think, Cris. So that's sort of my take on that.
I think the key word is experience.
Yeah.
And to some degree, what are you? Do you think of yourself as a patient? Do you think of yourself as a consumer? I have to say, for me, I mostly thought of myself as a patient. But if I had a high deductible insurance policy and I was confronting some choices, boy, howdy, would I put on my consumer hat. And I think I would have approached my journey differently, for instance, depending on what my insurance coverage looked like.
Yeah. Was there another comment there, Cris?
I'm trying to go through them. I think there was a comment, I can't find it right now, but it's this notion, and Ed, we've talked about this and we'll address it, of, your healthcare is determined more by where you go than anything else. There was some research a couple of years ago that said your outcome from a health incident was more influenced by your zip code than your genetic code, which is a disappointment, right, to those of us in the industry. And it's true that you're going to get a different experience depending on which healthcare organization you engage in. And I think that takes us back to the idea of consumer experience and choice. When you enter the healthcare system when you're diagnosed with some disease, you do have choice. And I get approached often, and Ed, you probably got the same sort of stories of people would say, my sister-in-law was just diagnosed someplace with a really aggressive form of cancer, and she's interested in a second opinion. Can you help me get her into Mayo Clinic? And that's something that we do. And I think part of a viewpoint we would have is, if you happen to have that ability, not everyone does. There are lots and lots of star ratings and other things that come out of CMS and other organizations that can help you understand, is the convenient hospital down the street the right place for me, depending on the illness that I have? Or is it worthwhile to drive across town to go to a different hospital where I'm going to get a different and better result? Consumers should know that and should take action on it.
I saw the one where to put Hal on the spot, right? Are we speaking at HIMSS? Are we speaking to him? Yeah, and we need a book signing as well from Hal. Yeah, we hope to share more at HIMSS.
Chris and Ed, this is Alex. If I can ask a quick question too, while we're going through and others are putting things in the chat here. But it seems like all of us in healthcare, those who are here in our audience, we've all experienced healthcare maybe from the inside out, right? From our organizations. But what can we do, because we've got some insider knowledge about how our organizations operate, to advocate for those patients? So we're all dealing with, elderly parents or friends, or, through the pandemic, trying to figure out how to even get connected to telemedicine and where do I go? How can we advocate for them?
Yeah, I have certainly become a patient advocate since going through my journey, and my day job as CIO. I might not think that I'm directly related to patient care, and maybe I should just shut up and keep the server spinning. But I'm fortunate. I work for an organization that has this principal value that's been drilled into everybody. And if you ask anyone from a brain surgeon to someone who is in facilities and cleaning rooms, why is what's Mayo Clinic's principal value? Everyone will say the needs of the patient come first. It's, I think it has to be tattooed on you if you work at Mayo. So we're really open to that idea of how that works. And I've been in meetings when we've had contentious issues and people seem to be at odds and we can't seem to break through, and someone will quietly say, what's the patient need here? And that is a liberating and really great experience. So I feel like I have opportunities daily to speak up for what the patient interest is. And I think all my peers have the same sort of setting. Not every healthcare organization is exactly the same, but I think all of us, regardless of what our jobs are, have an opportunity to speak up for, what do our patients really need?
Yeah, and there's one last question, just because of time, from Yvonne on children's healthcare. That's really good. And Cris, that's something I don't know that we've super contemplated yet, but we should. And that is, how does children fit into all these things? How can we get them more involved in their care? I think we do have some great ideas, but I don't know that we had specifically contemplated that. So Yvonne, thank you. You have now contributed to our book and some of the things that we'll write about, because that is super critical as well to the healing process. And so that's something we'll give more thought to. We're big believers in it, and we'll write to that as well. Make sure we address that.
Yeah, just briefly, Ed, I mentioned a friend of mine who had a daughter who had leukemia twice and taught me a lot about cancer. I know that she worked really hard to engage her, first time almost toddler daughter in, what do you want? And there are things that are non-negotiable. Chemotherapy was going to be administered, but there's really a question about how do you want to have that chemotherapy delivered? Yeah. And what do you want to have your room look like when you sleep in this bed overnight for 3 weeks? This is a pretty exceptional mom and a pretty exceptional daughter. But this little kid was actively engaged in her care. And I think it's because she had a strong parent who made sure that was true.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so we'll just wrap up by saying you can see how we believe the book will be helpful to all of us too in the industry, because you can help empower the patient by, hey, here's a model. Here's some things, have you built up you might not use the same words that we do, like village and things like that, but you can definitely take a lot of the things in there, the model, and really help empower some of those patients who may not have that already in play, and help them have a better experience in addition to what you're doing as an organization. So thank you for having us. What a privilege, what a joy, especially to be hanging out with all of you and hang out with Cris. So thank you.
I'd add my thanks as well too. Thanks to the CSO chapter. You guys are great.
Ed, Cris, and Hal, I truly appreciate, on behalf of the CSOHIMSS, truly appreciate you guys getting a chance to join us this morning and share this. We're all evolving so rapidly during this pandemic about what we need to do, and this patient experience is becoming front and center in a digital world. I got a chance just this past week to spend some time with a healthcare organization out in rural America, and I tell you what, the challenges, and just to learn and from somebody else who we take for granted here in more of an urban area, that they talked about, don't even have Wi-Fi, and what the schools and kids had to do to meet in, Kroger parking lots, and, just to attend school. And then we talked about the impact that had in healthcare. And then if you start to think and translate to what you guys were just sharing about a patient experience, imagine that if you don't have, Wi-Fi and, challenges in the rural areas of America. So it's always something to keep in mind. It is personalized, right? So.
Absolutely.
But I truly appreciate you guys getting a chance to join us this morning and sharing your thoughts and wisdoms here. It's fantastic. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And you guys are welcome to stay with us for as long as you want. And then I think we're going to take just a short break and retool our Zoom here a little bit so that we can bring our next guest up on stage here with us.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.